The snow had stopped falling, but the battlefield was still white with silence. In the early hours of January 1945, somewhere on the Eastern Front, a single Allied tank stood motionless among the ruins of a bombed-out village. Brick walls lay shattered like broken teeth. Burned trees clawed at the sky. Smoke drifted low, clinging to the frozen ground as if the war itself refused to move on. The tank was an American M4 Sherman Scarred, dented and blackened by fire. Its tracks were damaged. Its radio was dead, and enemy forces had already closed the circle around it. Inside the steel beast were 5 men. Lieutenant Daniel Rebes, the commander, pressed his gloved hand against the cold metal wall. He had stopped checking his watch hours ago. Time didn't matter anymore. Only survival did. They were surrounded. The mission had been simple. Advance with the column. Support infantry. Punch through enemy defenses. But simple missions never stayed simple in war. A sudden German counterattack had shattered their formation. Anti-tank guns erupted from hidden positions. Tanks burned. Men screamed. Smoke swallowed everything. When the chaos settled, Reeves Sherman was alone. "No signal," muttered Corporal Hayes, the radio operator, tapping the dead set uselessly. Driver Tom Wilkins leaned forward, peering through his narrow viewport. "Tracks are damaged. Sir, we're not going anywhere." Reeves closed his eyes for a brief second. A tank that couldn't move was a coffin waiting to be sealed. Outside, the enemy was patient. German infantry began probing the area cautiously. They knew the Sherman was still alive. They had seen it fight. They had seen it kill. Earlier that morning, the tank crew had destroyed 2 enemy half-tracks and scattered a platoon of infantry with its main gun and machine guns. That made them a threat, and threats had to be eliminated. Inside the tank, the air was thick with oil fumes, sweat, and fear. Gunner Mike Red Collins wiped his hands on his jacket, though they were already stained black. "How long do you think before they bring the big guns?" he asked, quietly. Reeves didn't answer immediately. He didn't need to. They all knew. Anti-tank teams. Panzerfausts. Maybe even a Tiger tank if they were unlucky. The Sherman's armor wasn't built for heroics. It was built for numbers. For teamwork. For moving forward with support. Not for standing alone. The first attack came at dawn. A sharp crack echoed through the ruins as a Panzerfaust slammed into the tank's side armor. The explosion rocked the vehicle violently, throwing the crew against their stations. "Hit!" Wilkins shouted. "Damage report." "Damage report, Gravis." "Bark." "Armor held," Collins replied, voice tense. "No penetration." They had been lucky. Moments later, German infantry rushed forward, using rubble and shell craters for cover. Reeves swung the turret, the Sherman's machine gun roaring to life. Tracers cut through the cold air, ripping into the advancing soldiers. Men fell. Others scattered. The tank lived. For now, hours passed in brutal repetition. Attack. Silence. Attack again. Each time, the enemy tested a different angle. Grenades rolled against the hull. Rifle fire rattled harmlessly off steel. Another Panzerfaust struck the front glacis, leaving a scorched scar but failing to breach. Inside, the crew counted each breath. Ammunition was running low. Water was nearly gone. The heater had failed, and the cold crept in, numbing fingers and stiffening joints. Frost formed along the interior walls, glittering faintly in the dim light. During a brief lull, Hayes broke the silence. "Lieutenants, why don't they just leave us and move on?" Reeves looked through the periscope, scanning the ruins. "Because we're still breathing," he said. "And because, as long as this tank stands, it reminds them they haven't won." By nightfall, the Germans changed tactics. Instead of frontal assaults, they began encircling the tank more tightly. Mortar rounds dropped nearby, shaking the ground and collapsing what little cover remained. One explosion flipped debris onto the tank as the engine deck, partially blocking ventilation. Smoke seeped inside. "We can't take this forever," Collins said. coughing. Reeves knew he was right. But surrender was never spoken. That night, something strange happened. A German soldier crept close under the cover of darkness, carrying explosives. He was young, barely more than a boy. His hands shook as he reached the tank's rear. Just as he raised the charge, the turret swung. Reeves had spotted the movement. A single burst from the machine gun ended the attempt. The silence afterward was heavier than before. No one inside the tank celebrated. They understood the truth of war too well. By the second day, the Sherman looked less like a tank and more like a wreck that refused to admit it was dead. Paint peeled, metal warped. The barrel was scorched black. Yet every time the enemy attacked, the tank answered. German officers grew frustrated. Reports were sent up the chain. How could one crippled Sherman hold out this long? The answer was simple. The men inside refused to die. As the sun dipped low on the second evening, Reeves gathered his crew with a few quiet words. "We're still here," he said. "That means we fight. If this tank goes down, it goes down fighting." Outside, engines rumbled in the distance. This time, it wasn't infantry. It was armor. Reeves tightened his grip on the periscope. The final test was coming, and the tank that refused to die was about to face its deadliest enemy yet. The sound reached them before the sight. A deep, mechanical growl rolled through the ruins, slow and deliberate, like a predator that knew it could not be stopped. The ground trembled faintly beneath the Sherman's hull. German armor. Lieutenant Daniel Reeves felt his chest tighten. He had hoped foolishly that the enemy would grow tired of them, that they would divert their strength elsewhere. But now the war had decided otherwise. Through the periscope, Reeves saw it emerge from behind the shattered buildings. A Panther tank. Its sloped armor caught the fading light of dusk, massive and confident. Unlike the Sherman, this machine had not been battered by days of fighting. It was fresh, powerful, deadly. Panther. 12 o'clock, Reeves said calmly. Inside the tank, no one spoke. They all knew the odds. The Sherman's 75mm gun could kill a Panther boot only at close range, and only with a perfect shot. From the front, the Panther was almost invulnerable. "We've got 3 armor-piercing rounds left," Collins said quietly. Rebs nodded. "Then we make them count." The Panther stopped at the edge of the village, its turret turning slowly as if searching for the ghost that had humiliated German infantry for 2 days. Infantry fanned out around it, confident now that their steel giant had arrived. The first shot came without warning. The Panther fired. The shell screamed through the air and slammed into the Sherman's side. The impact was catastrophic. Metal shrieked. The tank lurched violently, throwing the crew hard against their stations. "Damage," Reeves shouted. Wilkins coughed, blood on his lip. "Tracks. Gone. Sir, completely. We're not moving again." Smoke poured in. The lights flickered and died. The Sherman was now blind and immobile, but it was not silent. Collins swung the turret with manual controls, muscles straining. "Target acquired." "Fire," Reeves ordered. The Sherman's gun roared. The shell struck the Panther's turretrine, glancing off, but leaving a deep scar. Not a kill, but enough to get the enemy's attention. The Panther responded instantly. Another shot slammed into the Sherman's front armor. This time, the steel bent inward. Spalling fragments sprayed inside the tank like shrapnel. Hayes screamed as a piece of hot metal tore into his shoulder. "Medic," he gasped, then fell silent. Reeves grabbed him, pressing a bandage against the wound. Hayes was alive, but barely. Outside, German infantry began advancing again, encouraged by the Panther's presence. Panzerfaust teams moved closer, confident now that the American tank was finished. Reeves made a decision. "Red," he said to Collins. "Load he." Collins hesitated. "Sir? That won't stop the Panther." "I know," Reeves replied, "but it'll stop everything else." The next shell exploded among the infantry, collapsing walls and throwing bodies into the air. Machine guns raked the rubble, forcing the Germans back into cover. The Panther fired again. This time, The shot punched through the Sherman's side armor. Flames erupted inside. Wilkins screamed as fire licked at his legs. Collins grabbed the extinguisher, emptying it blindly. The fire died, but the smell of burned flesh remained. "We're done, sir," Wilkins whispered, pain breaking his voice. "We can't take another hit." Reeves knew the truth. The tank that refused to die was dying, but surrender still wasn't an option. Reeves looked at his crewmen who had fought without sleep, without hope, without relief. Men who had turned a broken machine into a symbol of defiance. "We've got one last round," Collins said. Reeves stared through the periscope. The Panther was advancing now, closing the distance, confident in its superiority. "Wait," Reeves said softly. The Panther turned slightly, exposing its side as it maneuvered around Rubel. "There," Reeves said. "Fire." The last shell flew. It struck the Panther's side armor just below the turret. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then flames erupted from the German tank's engine compartment. Black smoke poured into the sky. The Panther stopped, burning fiercely. Kill. Inside the Sherman, there was no cheer, only exhausted silence. But the victory came at a price. The Sherman was now completely exposed. German infantry regrouped quickly. Panzerfausts fired in unison. One struck the rear. The explosion ripped through the engine compartment, and fire surged uncontrollably. The tank shook as if in agony. "Evacuate," Reeves shouted. He dragged Hayes toward the hatch. Collins pulled Wilkins, half-conscious, toward the escape route. Reeves was the last to leave. As he climbed out, bullets cracked around him. He hit the ground hard, rolling into a crater. Collins followed. Wilkins collapsed beside them. Hayes didn't make it out. The Sherman burned behind them, flames reaching into the dark sky. Ammunition cooked off inside. Each explosion a final breath of defiance. German soldiers approached cautiously, weapons raised. Then, suddenly artillery. Allied artillery. Shells began falling around the village, thunderous and merciless. The Germans scatter, retreating as chaos consumed the ruins. Relief had finally arrived. By morning, Allied infantry secured the area. They found the Sherman still smoldering, its hull torn and blackened, surrounded by enemy dead and the wreck of a Panther tank. An officer counted the damage. Over 40 enemy casualties. Multiple failed assault attempts. One destroyed Panther, all caused by a single, immobilized tank. The crew was evacuated. Wilkins survived. Collins survived. Reeves survived. When asked later how they endured, Reeves gave a simple answer. "The tank didn't save us," he said. "The men inside it did." The Sherman was eventually scrapped. Its steel melted down and reused. But for 2 days in January 1945, that tank refused to die. And in doing so, it proved something the enemy never understood. Steel fights with guns, but wars are held by will.